the Mutual Broadcasting System presents Richie and John.
Two voices strong in the podcast sphere. Richie and John, let's make it clear. Bringing the stories, bold and true. Standing with pride for the LGBTQ. The Mutual Broadcasting System, the network of pride. With Mutual, it's voices that are taking your side. Richie and John, hear the world echo your name. Fighting for justice, lighting freedom's flame. Champions of diversity, truth in the night. In the battle for equality, they're ready to fight.
The podcast that connects you with the people, events, headlines, and lifestyle interests of the global LGBTQ plus community. Here's Richie Roy and John McMullen.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Richie and John. It is an unorthodox episode. We did not have Newsday Tuesday this week because my wonderful co-host John McMullen was taken with a bout of food poisoning. I know. It's terrible.
It was so horrible. It was terrible. I don't know that I've ever felt that bad for 24 to 48 hours in my life.
The food poisoning is terrible. I mean, basically, like, we're living through the political equivalent of food poisoning right now. So, but, with that, it is not Newsday Tuesday. It is Newsday Saturday. And we've got some stories for you. We've got a bunch of things to talk about. And the first one...
It's coming so fast and furious that we're going to go right back into Newsday Tuesday this next week because there will be so much, but we'll get back to the lifestyle and expanding on other stuff that's going on in the community next weekend.
Yes, but in the meantime, the first story we have is a story that is familiar in some ways because we've talked a lot about companies rolling back DEI. First, it was Robbie Starbuck. Now it is in the face of this administration's saber rattling. But this one is particularly odious. John, why?
It was hard to think that it could get much worse other than if maybe the board of Costco had, thrown us under the bus. Fortunately, they didn't, and there are some other companies like the airlines that have not. However, in a fairly significant move, Paramount's gay co-CEOs, they have. That's George Cheeks and Chris McCarthy. Also another executive there, Brian Robbins, announced the termination of several diversity, equity, and inclusion programs aligning with executive orders from President Donald Trump. These changes mean that Paramount will no longer set specific hiring goals based on race or gender, nor collect demographic data from applicants. The company's decision comes in response to Trump's orders against DEI endorsed companies, particularly those that are receiving federal funding. The memo from Paramount's leadership indicates compliance with new mandates despite previous commitments to DEI efforts. And while Paramount says that it will reevaluate approaches to diversity from business objectives, Cheeks and McCarthy, as openly gay leaders, stress the continuing importance of representation in media. This rollback here, can I try and talk out of both sides of my face and see how that works? This rollback follows other companies in reassessing DEI strategies with mounting consumer dissatisfaction visible in recent surveys. Many consumers are expressing willingness to boycott brands, thank God, neglecting diversity commitments and highlighting ongoing public demand for inclusivity, which I'm glad to hear about. And before you go thinking, well, how many movies does Paramount turn out a year, or how many shows do I really watch on Paramount Plus? Paramount is a giant in the entertainment industry and information industry in this country. So under that flag is, stuff like MTV and CBS News. It's a huge multimedia empire. And the fact that they have not one, but two co-CEOs, co-presidents of the company who are both queer, and they're going along with this game is absolutely maddening. It makes me far more mad than a company like Toyota or Ford. Because even though we have spent a ton of money with those companies, they were not run by two gay guys. So thanks for throwing us overboard, bitches.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. It's also, I mean, there are a couple things about this that are pretty bad. I mean, one is, again, the way that they continue to stress the continuing importance of representation in media. Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, what it means to me, Richie, is it means, well, we'll keep writing a check for somewhere between 25 and 100 grand to the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, who've been sitting on their fucking asses through this whole thing, just like HR.
I think what it is just corporate speak. Basically, they're not standing up to, they're rolling over. I mean, they're rolling over all of these media companies, CBS, I think, was it CBS or ABC, big settlements for these Trump defamation cases that were totally bogus. They're all afraid of FCC investigations and basically, being targeted. But, a company like Paramount is a company that's really invested in storytelling, right? And at the end of the day, the best storytellers are the most diverse storytellers. I mean, you can't tell diverse stories without diverse people. And so if specifically, because it's talking about hiring practices, if their hiring practices if they're just turning their back on diverse hiring practices, what they're saying is, we actually don't even care to tell your stories. Like, yeah. It's awful. It's also, I think that at this moment, like, corporate bravery is important. We've talked about Costco. There are some other companies. As far as I'm concerned right now, if you're doing, what is the term? We talk about it a lot, but basically sort of complying in advance, not even waiting for the courts to weigh in, because a lot of these DEI orders are under preliminary injunction because they're vague and ambiguous and, run afoul of constitutional protections and will probably be thrown out. But to kind of preemptively just obey and, throw out your programs means that you don't even have like a shred of, decency or bravery or even conviction about your principles. And so it's pretty embarrassing. I'm happy to say I do not have a Paramount subscription. Part of that's because I don't watch TV or movies. But even if I did, I would probably think about whether I wanted to keep that subscription. And especially when you think back about, some very classic Paramount properties, things like Star Trek. Star Trek, which is basically was, a pioneering show when it came to things like representation of people of different races, all, in a position of power, Lieutenant Uhura, and, moving on from there. It's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And to come from two homosexuals.
I'd love to hear from Mr. Sulu on this right now, because I think George Takei might have something very, very gay to say that they wouldn't like, for sure.
Oh yeah, yeah. He's great on social media. He's very funny. But yeah, so that's a bummer story, and we'll keep covering these DEI rollbacks. I have a background in higher education, and it's a big issue in higher ed right now, because higher ed is really in the crosshairs of this administration for DEI, for all kinds of things, for free speech.
I remember, because I was working in the high-tech industry for several years in the mid-late 90s, and I recall that it was really a big thing at that time, and we've talked about this before, the benefits that you offered and the programs you had and the way you treated your LGBTQ employees in particular played a significant role in recruitment. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that these companies fail to realize is that this can backfire in other ways. Going back to how things were back then, there is also the concern of, are people, and you are in a situation to think about this as well when you think about HR related things. Are companies, organizations, institutions like educational institutions, are they going to be able to recruit the people that they really want that really have the skills and the talent to do the best job when they aren't offering these kinds of things. It will be a reason, I think, in the very near future for people to say, I'm not interested in working for you because these are not ideals that you hold as an entity.
I mean, I think you have to go back to kind of where this is all coming from, and it goes back again to the lack of bravery and even the lack of business sense, because this administration, when you look at who is in charge, who the cabinet is, you look at the president and vice president are, and you look at decisions that they've made, firing, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was a black man, and replacing him with a completely less qualified, unqualified white guy, firing the head of the Coast Guard, who was a woman, and giving her less than, 12 hours to vacate her home, and replacing her with, I think, probably a white guy. Their presumption is that any white man, straight white man, is better at any job than any person of color, any woman, any queer person, any disabled person, the whole 9 yards. That is their presumption. That is literally like how they're thinking. They literally think that a bloated, straight white idiot from Fox News knows better, with no experience, knows better than a person of color with 40 years of experience. Simply because that's where their mind's at. And that's where these executive orders and these mandates come from, is that premise. And they are trying to inflict that wayward thinking on everyone. And unfortunately, these companies that should know better, that know that their business will be harmed by this kind of thinking, are rolling over. Yeah. That's the problem, is because at the end of the day, this is not good for business. It's bad for business. Yeah. But they're too scared to even put up a modicum of a fight or even wait for the courts to make a decision. It's really pathetic.
It is pathetic. It's all pathetic. It makes you really want to some days renounce your citizenship. But I haven't found an easy way to go somewhere else yet. In a pivotal decision that happened on Wednesday of this week, the United States Supreme Court rejected President Trump's emergency appeal to halt billions, count them with a B, as in boy, like a white boy, in foreign aid, upholding Congress's founding decisions. This intense 5-4 ruling drew a strong dissent from Justice Samuel Alito, who criticized the court's move as overreach, undermining executive authority. Trump initially enforced a 90-day freeze on foreign aid upon taking office, and then affecting programs like the U.S. Agency for International Development and PEPFAR, pivotal in global health efforts, of course. Critics argued that this freeze was both unconstitutional and detrimental, abruptly stalling life-saving projects worldwide. According to advocacy groups, the cessation of funding left HIV prevention and treatment programs in countries like Lesotho, Tanzania, and South Africa devastated, affecting hundreds of thousands of people who are in need. And despite partial exemptions announced for essential services, the impact has been severe. The administration's broader foreign policy reorientation has stirred controversy, especially amid the humanitarian setbacks that followed these aid cuts. Let me correct that. That followed these aid cuts.
Yeah. So this is an interesting situation. The Supreme Court actually did the right thing here. Samuel Alito obviously just believes we should have a king. If the king's a Republican, to be clear, if we had a Democrat in power, the Democrat should not be able to do a goddamn thing. But if you're a Republican, you should be a king and should be above anything. I will say that one of the interesting things about this decision is it really brings up also, though, this point that the current Republican world is at, which is that every decision, every moment for a Republican's life, Republican who's in power, you are on the knife's edge. Everything is a litmus test, and everything is about whether you toe the line, because one of the folks who was in the 5-4 was Amy Coney Barrett. On Twitter, people like Jack Posobiec and other right-wing agitators were calling her things like a DEI hire. They called her Amy Commie Barrett. So literally this horrible, extremely right-wing conservative justice appointed by Trump, because she made one decision that didn't go their way in terms of his autocratic desires, they are throwing her out. She's garbage. That is how they are. They literally, if you step out of line once,
you're not.
Exactly. And so it's interesting to see how it works, and I bet they're probably pissed off that they can't impeach her.
I'll tell you one guy who's probably very upset with this administration, this government, for the real human harm that comes from the freeze that they put on this program, where this food is just going to sit and go bad. And that is probably the pontiff. And there are a number of members of this Supreme Court who are of the Catholic faith, and Amy is one of them. But so is Justice Alito. And there have been a lot of decisions that have been made by him with supposedly his allegiance towards the interests of the church in mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I will tell you, I am very certain that if the pontiff were in good enough health to travel, he probably would have quite a bit to come and pound the eardrums of Justice Alito with right now, because if I were him, I would be more worried about the fact that the Pope is probably not long for this world and soon going to be talking with the Maker, and that things could trickle down to St. Pete at the gate. Judgment Day, I don't think is going to be a good day for Justice Alito. When he does things like this, I can understand it when it comes to various social issues, why he would take the stand that he takes. But when he is part and parcel to this anti-human nonsense, he is not a man of his faith. I grew up in the Catholic Church. I can tell you he is not a man of his faith.
This has been for a while now. This has been a reality with American Catholicism, especially when the Pope happens to be someone who isn't like a fascist cretin.
Right.
The current Pope, warts and all, not that he's perfect whatsoever, and not that Catholicism is perfect, not that religion is perfect. It's all kind of compromised. But as it goes, he has some sort of slightly progressive tendencies. He's a Jesuit, and he has expressed some, ideas of sort of maybe bringing the church into at least the 17th century, if not the 21st. So, but they hate him. They don't even think he's legitimate. And you have not only just not lay people, you have lay Catholics like Alito, but you even have bishops in major cities that basically are just flouting the authority of the Pope because they think that he's too lib for them. He's woke. And so American Catholicism basically is currently, and it wasn't always the case, but currently is basically just a kind of right-wing arm of, it's Christianity plus some robes. Protestantism with like a little piece of wafer that you get every week. It's not, if you look at the sort of the history of Catholicism in this country, Catholics for many years were strong in unions, strong Democrats for things like social safety net, for things like taking care of the least among us. A lot of Catholics have just ditched that shit and they're like, fuck it, whatever. Like, I don't know what to say about it. Alito can go get his stupid ashes on Wednesday last week and consider himself a Catholic, but every decision, including basically to immiserate hundreds of thousands of people in the developing world for no good reason, that's in line with Catholic values, whatever. I mean, give me a break.
Well, he can take his flagpole and shove it up his, at any rate, there's more news.
There is more news. There was a thing that happened this week that I did not participate in because I'm a sane person, but some people made themselves miserable by watching the State of the Union address by the current sitting president, whose name I prefer not to say as much as I can avoid it. But, there are some folks who kind of, were supposed to be there, but they decided that they had enough too. So 3 LGBTQ plus Congress members, Representatives Mark Takano, Emily Randall, and Mark Pocan, joined a walkout from the current president's congressional address, the State of the Union, after he delivered remarks rife with misinformation and transphobic undertones, and overtones, to be honest. Detailing their reasons, the lawmakers stressed their inability to tolerate the dishonesty. Representative Pocan publicly criticized the address, dubbing Trump's behavior as unbecoming of the presidency. Quote, "What he didn't talk about were his plans to cut Medicaid and education," Pocan asserted, highlighting his frustration with Trump's omission of critical policy impacts. Representative Takano departed the speech, citing frustration with Trump's attacks instead of addressing pertinent issues like unlawful veteran dismissals. Takano stated on social media, quote, "I walked out." Representative Randall expressed her reasoning in a video, emphasizing the perseverance required to dispute Trump's false State of the Union narrative. Further demonstrating their dissent, lawmakers like Representative Rashida Tlaib held signs conveying opposition to Trump's policies as the president touted successes that many felt contrasted sharply with his administration's actions against vulnerable communities. Did you watch it, John?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of it, as much as I could tolerate. I'm sorry, I thought I would do what he did. The president and his new clothes, the emperor, the king, it was unbelievable. So I had no intention of watching any of it, but I was watching the pregame show. I was interested in seeing what all the talking heads were going to say and, what was expected to come. And then I made a mistake, which was to not just turn the TV set off until it was over with and get, just the highlights. However, I will say, having been to a State of the Union before with somebody who was not a friendly president, GW, I can tell you that this was hands down, and I was glad to have our colleagues in the industry confirm this, one and all, that this was absolutely the worst excuse for a even sort of State of the Union address in the history of State of the Union addresses. And he certainly outdid himself on Tuesday evening. However, I will say that it reminded me of my experience when I was working at Sirius Satellite Radio, and my producer, David Guggenheim, had been friends with, what's that blonde horse's name? The horse's ass, that really nasty right-wing woman. She has long blonde hair, and she's friends with Milo Yiannopoulos and Ann Coulter.
Oh, God, yeah.
And I always took it as a badge of honor that I was able to keep her from hanging up on me for 17. However, I didn't make it 17 minutes before I, too, had to just tune out because the lies were coming so fast and furious, and I was just in the process of recovering from food poisoning that I could not handle the whiplash of my neck going each direction at lightning speed every time I was looking at a massive whopper of a lie flying by. And it was just absolutely mind-numbing. In fact, I didn't just turn off the TV set. I turned it off and I walked down the hall to my bedroom and I went and laid down and thought, why aren't Richie and I here doing a live stream tonight and just laughing through this whole thing at him?
Yeah.
But I know it's, and I learned this lesson, believe me, on Sunday morning. I know it's not really nice to have to expose yourself to vomiting in front of other people. So here we are now. And yeah, it was a fucking disaster, Richie. It was a goddamn disaster. And it made me more embarrassed than I've ever been to be from the United States of America.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's tough. It's tough because
I don't want to be dressed like the president anymore. So hold on.
It's tough, because in a way, I think one of the things that we have to grapple with is, whether, let's say that there was even tampering with the election, that Trump didn't truly win.
Maybe.
But and I'm saying let's posit that, like let's just even say that that's true. Let's say that that's true. There still was a big chunk of people who saw what happened in the first one, who heard what he said, what he wanted to do, voted for it, and are falling in line and literally buying the lies that they see in front of them that don't even comport with the facts on the ground in front of their eyes. The fact that there are Americans that are so poorly educated, so credulous, and so mean-spirited, and whatever you pick so.
They don't think that they are.
I know. You can, whatever. Ignorance is bliss, I guess. But, but it does highlight the fact that, folks in Europe or anywhere else are looking at this country and just being like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, it's a joke. It's a joke. The president's a joke, and the country, by extension, is a joke. Because the U.S. in the 20th century was basically wholesale, strong-arming the world into American-style democracy and saying, our way is the way. It's, we figured it out. We've gotten it down. And we've got this great thing. We've got economic prosperity. We've got a civil service. We got all this good stuff, and we know what's up, and you guys don't, and you should adopt our version. It's been shown now that it's so feeble and so it's built on this house of cards that one complete charlatan, this illiterate charlatan, mean asshole can, and his crony friend can buy himself the whole country, and everyone will just go along with it. So it shows, I think, Europe and most of the rest of the world that, yeah, we were these arriviste, silly, toddlers the whole time.
By the way, can I just offer, for those who either saw some of it, saw highlights of it, saw all of it, and made it through without having a stroke, I want to encourage those of you who have not seen it and are concerned about the country and I know that this is tens of millions of people at least who are very worried about survival, just basic survival at this point because of the way that the doors are, coming off, the hinges are flying off. I would like to encourage you to watch something else that we saw on Tuesday night. Well, I saw it Wednesday, but a lot of people watched it, I think, on Tuesday night when it was originally happening. Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont held a kind of his own Democratic response. He was not the official Democrat responding to the event, but I think that he did an extraordinarily good job of helping bring people back to the center and letting them know, here's what we've got to do and here's how we need to do it. And we get that a lot of you are burned out and just ready to be past all of this, but here's part of the plan, and there are people who are out there fighting. And the thing that I love about my friend Rachel, probably more than anything of late, is that she keeps reminding people just how much winning Donald Trump is doing. Because and I say that facetiously, of course, because he's not winning a lot right now. Those decisions by the courts, the lower courts, certainly things are going to end up at the Supreme Court where he's got some friends. But we've already seen, they're teeing it up where the Supreme Court is not going to have any choice but to pay attention to the fucking Constitution. And if they don't, this country will burn down. But I think if you listen to what Senator Sanders said, and his video statement is still up online. I know it's up on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. It's also been posted by Vermont newspaper and some television stations and others. And basically it's near entirety, and it's only about 21, 22 minutes. But it certainly gave me a real sense of relief. It's not by any means we're out of the woods, but it makes me feel confident that there are good, solid, and competent people who are there to deal with his incompetence and insanity, and that we do have a chance to come out of this for the better, even though it's going to hurt for a little while.
I'll have to listen to that, because that's not how I'm feeling. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the things that he's doing, the executive orders, are being challenged in the courts. But
I'll tell you also, our friend Joyce Silver, who has been with us before and is the chairwoman of the Riverside County, California Democratic Party, she actually called me and said, if you haven't seen this, you need to see it. And I think I'm going to invite her to come back and visit with us sometime in the next couple of weeks, because she's very actively involved in her region on how to deal right now, right here in your community with those things.
Yeah, I mean, great. I mean, I'd love to hear what she has to say. I hope she has a rosy view too. I don't have a rosy view, because they're breaking. I mean, because yes, some things are being challenged in the court, but there are things that actually are in the purview of the executive, and they are everything that they can do to break the government, they are doing in terms of firing people. And when you look at things like, the civil service generally, but you look at things specifically like the National Weather Service, the NOAA, NASA, EPA. These are fragile ecosystems that are built on
how many of those
and expertise. And the thing is, these are folks who have expertise, and they are being fired and not replaced. And the thing is, part of the way that this works, and we have this, is that there are younger people who are also passionate about these fields and think that there is a future in these fields for them. So they get educated in these fields, things like meteorology or astronomy or whatever. If this federal sort of system is decimated, no one's going to learn the things they need to learn to do those jobs. So even if in the future we have a different administration that wants to staff back up, there's not going to be anyone there to take those jobs, because no one's going to have been trained into them.
Yeah. Well, but what I'm trying to say, Richie, here is exactly to that point. Look at how many of these situations in the last couple of weeks they've been losing on, and they've either been ordered and are having now to reinstate people or get people back on the job because they realize how bad they fucked up, and the masses of citizens who are outraged that there's nobody there to make sure that the steak that they eat is going to be safe, or that the roads that they have to drive down, whether or not they're going to be safe to drive on because of weather conditions, or, any number of other things. Farmers who supported him in mass, who are pissed off because of what he did to USAID, which of course has a huge implication for them, but also, in so many other ways, the programs that they rely on and the services that they rely on to keep their farms operating. So it is blowing up in his face every single day. And people, what I want to, in a way, see is I want to see them go back to some of these people in their begging them to come back now, and have those people tell them, go fuck yourself. I'll come back when you have competent leadership.
Right. But the thing is, though, again, and I'd love to hear from Joy about this, is these are people you mentioned the farmers. I mean, the tariffs, China had, retaliatory tariffs on things like soybean and corn and, major commodity staples that will affect farmers, in addition to all, like you mentioned, the US aid and, all kinds of small business administration stuff. Farmers are going to be decimated. But what we're seeing is there have been some Republicans have had some very fiery town halls with people who are angry. But what the response is from Republican leadership is they are telling representatives and senators, stop having town halls.
Right.
So how is this going to get to them? How is the anger going to get to them if they're not picking up the phone and they're not doing town halls?
Well,
and the media is really hamstrung and controlled by people who are not paying attention, so that the rallies aren't even covered on the news. If a tree falls in a forest and no one's there, if there are miserable people angry and there's no one to listen or care, so what?
I had to laugh because there's a lot of Trump supporters who aren't supportive of these directions that he's taking with a number of things, and who've been picking up the phone and calling those mealy-mouthed loudmouths like Sean Hannity and giving them an earful on the air because he's got the ear of the president. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's just desserts. That's coming home to roost, exactly where it needs to.
Yeah. So to go back to a media story, because we talked about Paramount, there's another media company that has been doing some tricks recently. And that happens to be the one that has the little ears on it. That is Disney. Disney Pixar has introduced a Christian character into its new animated series Win or Lose, following the removal of a trans storyline from the exact same show. Initially, the series included
Frosty the Snow Turd.
Initially, the series a character identified as trans, but storylines referencing that have been cut, sparking debate over Disney's direction. The trans actress initially involved, shared her disappointment at the storyline's removal. Disney cited parental preferences for discussing certain topics independently as the reason for making the change. This also coincides with Disney scaling back its, you named it, DEI initiatives. The series debut episode now, instead of a trans character, features Lori, a character whose introduction includes a prayer to, quote, Heavenly Father. This move has been viewed by some as Disney conceding to conservative pressures, no shit, especially in an era where certain political groups vocally justify their views with Christian rhetoric, including Supreme Court justices regularly. Disney, however, has a history of supporting LGBTQ plus causes, evidenced by pride events and related initiatives, and so they're willing to take our dollars, but they are not willing to stand up, and they will throw a pious little girl in there instead of a trans character, because why not?
Here's my thought. Everybody should pick up the phone and call the office of the CEO. Who's there right now? Is it Iger? Is he back?
Is it still Iger?
Well, he left, and then I think, wasn't he there was...
Yeah, he's back. Yeah, he is. Yeah, it's him.
He came back. And I think you should call Bob Iger's office and say, look, we're okay with having a Christian character, but we don't want you to name her Lori, okay? No Lori. We have to do this in mass, folks. I mean, this can't be a onesie-twosie kind of thing. I want you to call and insist that the new character, who includes a prayer to the Heavenly Father, that her name is Karen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a Karen. It's a baby Karen. So that's Disney. And then, there's been a lot of news actually this week out of the VA. There's a move to cut 83,000 employees from the VA. Most likely, many of them will be from the VA health system, essentially crippling it and making it unsustainable. But additionally, we have folks who are leaving the VA for ideological reasons. Dr. Mary Brinkmeyer has resigned from the Department of Veterans Affairs, citing an inability to uphold transgender and non-binary veteran care after a directive removed federal recognition of these identities. The sweeping mandate from the Trump administration required federal agencies to eliminate materials deemed as promoting, quote, gender ideology. And if you listen to this show and you care about LGBTQ issues, I really say that you should go to the whitehouse.gov site and read the gender ideology executive order, because it is crazy. It's not that long, and it's very insane. And it really it sort of encapsulates a lot of what they're trying to do here, which is essentially there's no gender. Federal government now, gender doesn't exist. It's sex. It's biological sex at birth. So anything that is not biological sex at birth, a baby born with a dick or a vag, anything other than that, they're not interested. And in fact, they will penalize companies and agencies and anyone who acknowledges anything other than that. So Brinkmeyer, who's recognized for her dedicated service in supporting transgender military members, faced increasing pressures as the Hampton VA ordered the removal of all LGBTQ plus affirming resources. Despite holding a supervisory role, she resisted the orders, refusing to dismantle LGBTQ plus support materials, signaling her protest during a staff huddle. Feeling ultimately disheartened by the administration's indifference, and concerned about her own patients' welfare, Brinkmeyer resigned effective February 12th. Her departure disrupted planned guidance for interns, which added to her distress. Dr. Brinkmeyer will continue her practice in an affirming private sector role. She urges colleagues to remain steadfast and advises veterans to seek alternative care through community resources. The VA has yet to comment, probably won't. If they do, it will be some lickspittle saying that, that Dr. Brinkmeyer was some kind of, gender experimenting monster who is mutilating veterans, like the things that come out of their mouths, Anyway, good for Dr. Brinkmeyer for standing up. At some point you have to figure out what you're going to do. And, as we've said before with things like boycotts, exit noisily. If you're gonna do it, make sure everyone knows you're doing it. Again, I'd love for us to get Joy on and to hear her kind of, I guess, her thoughts on how to kind of have a different head on than this. Because when I see all this, I'm just like, they honestly are just breaking things. They don't care that they're broken, that they will hurt people, that people will die. This isn't even just like the pinpoint targeted rounding up of immigrants or deleting trans people from existing from the federal government, entirely. This is just the kind of general wash of psychopathic, sociopathic, just uncaring in all the decisions they're making. And most of that, you could say that it's, that it is Donald Trump. And a lot of it is Donald Trump, just the real shitty stuff is Donald Trump. But no, it's Trump when it comes to things like invading Canada or buying Greenland or trying to make, people of color essentially not exist or trans people. But all the other stuff, basically just destroying the federal government and all the good things that it brings so many people and throwing hundreds of thousands of people out of work. That's Elon Musk, because he is a ketamine fueled, just brain addled idiot who doesn't understand the worth of anyone or anything and never has.
Yeah. Well, let's not leave the Federalist Society out of this either, because
the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, all that. Yeah.
They have been pushing for this for so many years.
They have. They've been, in Project 2025, it is accomplished. Their goals are being accomplished, but a lot of it is through just knowing that if you break stuff, it's harder to put it back together. Yeah. And so, having someone who has shown himself to be an absolute expert at breaking things in Elon Musk and actually in Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump, is one of the only people who could open a casino and have it go bankrupt. But Elon Musk, buying Twitter for $44 billion and essentially, laying people off and ruining it to the point that it's worth, $7 billion within like a year or two. He's shown himself to be very sure of himself and very good at not being good at things. So, and the list goes on, things like Tesla or SpaceX or whatever, these companies that, again, he didn't found, he bought, are, to the extent they are successful, they're in spite of him, not because of him. Right. And so in any case, good for Dr. Brinkmeyer for standing up and, let's see more courage. And, speaking of courage, the LGBTQ Victory Fund and Victory Institute are important groups doing important work. We've talked about groups that have been a little asleep at the switch, like HRC and GLAAD. But, the LGBTQ Victory Fund is doing important work, and it has a new leader. Evan Lowe, an experienced former Californian Assembly member, has been named as the new president and CEO of the LGBTQ Victory Fund and Victory Institute. Taking over from Anise Parker, Lowe aims to continue and expand efforts to elect and train LGBTQ plus politicians, which is an important goal. In a statement, Lowe expressed excitement about leading organizations that have significantly influenced his career and emphasized his dedication to increasing LGBTQ plus representation. Over his 10-year tenure in the California State Assembly, Lowe established himself as a dynamic legislator and the first Asian American on the Campbell City Council. Known for his prolific legislative work, Lowe brings a wealth of experience and passion to his new role. His leadership will focus on empowering LGBTQ plus candidates, enhancing political impact, and making LGBTQ plus voices impossible to ignore. Lowe highlights the importance of authenticity in public service, drawing from his own journey, and remains committed to ensuring diverse representation at every level of government. And boy, do we need it, especially in moments like we have where we reported on a couple weeks ago that one of the few, if only, openly trans, representatives in the federal government was misgendered on the congressional floor. We need lots of LGBTQ folks in power.
Yeah, you want to talk about somebody who should have been censured for violating decorum. It should have happened when that happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the fact that it was, it basically kind of got not swept under the rug, but kind of just that it was not, people were not gagged. They kind of just were like, that's really appalling. I mean, that's really appalling. I mean, and that story still sticks.
Yeah, it'd be like going up and addressing something to the Speaker of the House and saying, Mrs. Johnson, let me ask you about how you keep your skirt clean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, there's all kinds of, I mean, it's just, it's dehumanizing.
Yeah.
It's super dehumanizing. There are so many ways that you could just, you could make sort of a similar, assertion, just taking someone's basic identity and making it a laugh line and not acknowledging it is grotesque. And so, yeah, if that's where we're at right now, we really do need as many folks at as many levels who are LGBTQ in positions of elected office or appointed office or however you put it, because representation does matter. And
Look, the Victory Fund's been around for a long time, as long as I've been involved in activism. And that goes back way too far. But I will say that they have done an amazing job over the years. Sometimes it's been getting people who, were almost ready for prime time into prime time shape to run for office. And other times they have worked with people who really never even saw themselves as getting involved in public office and turn them into at least viable candidates and ultimately into good candidates that represent our interests. And I highly recommend that every single person, and it's interesting because I watched somebody earlier this week on Rachel Maddow's program on MSNBC who came on, who is involved with organization that helps get people kick-started on young people running for public office. And they are fielding like 7 times the normal number of phone calls right now from people who are so fed up and angry and motivated to make a difference that they want to get involved. And, I think that David Hogg did a huge public service for our young people by being out there and being seen as, getting involved with the DNC and other efforts that are being done by people in states all across the United States are going to be really critical. But there are these organizations that will help you to become a good candidate. They will help you to formulate your ideas and your positions into doable campaigning and successful campaigning. And believe me, if I wasn't almost old enough to be Richie's grandpa, I'm not. Dad, maybe. But if I were not at the age that I am right now, I would absolutely be boots on the ground, asking for their help and doing my best to jump into this game. What I can do is I can take that history that I have, and many of us who are in my generation can do our best to help support younger people who have that will to be involved and to, gain, the expertise and the experience and perspective and get out there and be the front runners in this effort. So if Richie and I can encourage you to do anything, if you have thought even just a little bit about running for office, or I could do better than that guy or her,
do it.
I could wipe the floor with, Marjorie Taylor Greene. I can give a better hand job at a kids' theater than Lauren Boebert. Get in there.
Yeah.
We're waiting for you. We need you. You're the future. And the Gay and Lesbian Victory Fund, the lesbian, gay, bi, trans, queer, questioning, intersect, et cetera, Victory Fund, the Victory Fund. They're a great resource, and I encourage you to look them up online. If you have not experienced anything or seen what they do, you can find them easily online. Just Google them and pick up the phone and call them. Tell them what you want to do. And, you could make a huge difference on a school board if you have the ability to do the 3 R's.
Absolutely. Well, folks, I hope that you have a great rest of your weekend. Take some time, chill out a little bit. We have a long few years ahead of us. So get a little sleep, have a little snack, and get ready for Newsday Tuesday, because we will be back with more very shortly. And there is more to talk about. We have a story about the governor of California that we don't want you to miss. So we will talk about that on Tuesday and a lot of other things beside. In the meantime,
kind of on a shit list right now.
I know. I kind of hate that.
It sucks that that's the case, because I want him to be the next president.
We gotta kind of get him to get back in line. But anyway, Thank you all for listening, and we will be back next Tuesday. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining us on Richie and John. This podcast is a production of the Mutual Broadcasting System and is available at richieandjohn.com, as well as most major podcast portals, including Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and Spotify.
With courage bold and voices clear, for life, liberty, happiness, they persevere. Never in the shadows, they stand tall. For truth and freedom, they answer the call. Richie and John, hear the world echo your name. Fighting for justice, lighting freedom's flame. Champions of diversity, truth in the night. In the battle for equality, they're ready to fight. And as the fight goes on from sea to shining sea, Richie and John, you're the voice of the free. Keep shining bright, your impact will grow. The world stands with you on the Richie and John Show.